Good afternoon. So, Old Testament versus New Testament, which one is preferable? Well, I would have to say, on its face, in my opinion, is the Old Testament. And the main reason why I would say that is because the New Testament does have some good philosophy in it. It really does. Particularly the idea that you judge a tree by its fruits, which means you judge a person by their works. That's a really good one. There's also some really good stuff in there about hypocrisy and this and that. But I drive around. I listen to I'll be surfing through the radio channels, and I'll catch like a Christian preacher going on about like today. There's a passage in the New Testament which it says, don't resist evil. And let people step on you, and let people slap you around. And no, this isn't good. This is not good philosophy. That's not good. There's stuff in the Gospels that I genuinely respect and appreciate, but that's definitely not part of it. And it's so contrary to the Old Testament, which is why one wonders if they really do belong together. Because, so. And now let me give you some examples. I was looking at because I'm not on Facebook, because Facebook blocked me for arguing with Muslims and atheists and being too effective or something. Or you have to be very sensitive with these people. They're very sensitive to being offended. Now you can offend Christianity all you want on those pages, but if you offend a Muslim or an atheist, it's like the end of the world, right? And I'm not even particularly Christian, as I just described to you, that I actually prefer the Old Testament. Is the Old Testament Jewish? No. The Old Testament is the book of the Israelites, who were the Aramaean people, and out of that, one of the tribes was the tribe of Judah. So the Judah tribe was part of that, but it's not a Jewish book particularly. The Jews didn't really. No one called themselves the Jews, I think, until after the Greek period or something, or maybe during the Persian. I don't know, but it's not the Old Testament. They did come up with their new, the Pharisees who broke away from the Roman Christian government and wanted to be separate. They started calling themselves the Jews after they reorganized their religion after Christianity. But okay, so let me give you some examples of some Christian philosophy I don't like. Oh, there's this guy, he's a rabbi, he's like a Jewish Christian guy on the radio. And he was going on about how Jesus is going to come in a cloud. Jesus is going to come down in a cloud. Well, that's just silly. That's astrotheology. That's why astrotheology is misleading in Christianity, because a lot of astrotheological tradition kept going in the Bible, and so now you're expecting God to come down from space. Well, that's not the Creator God. I've already talked about that in my other videos, but we're not going to talk about that right now, because I don't want to just get stuck on that one subject. Even though it clarifies a lot, you can watch my other videos and I talk about it. But it's just, this is just another example of, to a very large extent, that's called worshiping a false god. It's not just the Christians. It's I don't know what exactly. I think that in Judaism there's probably different ideas about God. I don't really know exactly what they think of it as, but it seems if it follows the biblical tradition, in a lot of cases it's believed to be outside somewhere in space, in the heavens, coming down from the heavens and coming down in a cloud or this or that. So yeah, it carries on that tradition of frankly a false god. Frankly, a false god. There's a lot of stuff in the Bible that teaches you the different, that you're supposed to say this is, a statue is not God and God is not a statue. Well, God is also not something coming from space. That's not God. So that's a false god. But then there's other passages that point to the true God, which is the God of one's conscience and has to do with righteousness and virtue. That's where you find that's like where the map leads to the true thing, which is divine and which is eternal and which is immortal. But I don't want to get into that. I want to talk about what other people are saying and how it's actually unfortunate because it leads people away from the true God. Now, there's another social media network I'm on, which is Christian, which I like. It's run by a Christian guy. I'm not going to say his name or the website because we're in an age where saying people's names can like get you kicked off of YouTube, you know? Like just you can't mention a name because it's this or that and it's bad and but so he actually had a post, I'm going to read it to you, which says that was about Jesus or Christianity. Let's see if I can find it real quick. The suggestion here is that this is going to take me longer than I thought. Is that Jesus came to save everybody? Oh, here. That's not it. So his suggestion, which I disagree with, is that Jesus Christ. Oh, here. This is his quote, and he believes this, and I know people have a right to believe what they want. I'm on his social media thing because I need free speech, and so he allows it there, which is good. And it's mostly the Christians who are fighting back against ending free speech. But I'm going to read you what he says here about the Bible. It says, nowhere in the Bible does it say one specific race of people gets a pass for rejecting Christ. Nowhere. So the allusion here, he's alluding to the idea that all the races on earth are to accept Jesus Christ, and that this is somehow part of the biblical story. It's not. It's not. In fact, I wrote that that the story suggests that Christ came to preach to the lost Israelites. He actually did not come to save everyone. Of course, I didn't get any likes on that, which is fine. I'm not going for likes, but I'm going for the truth, which is if you read the story, it specifically says in a particular passage, I don't know exactly which one, but I'm sure if you look up the keywords or phrases, you'll be able to find it pretty easily, is that Jesus Christ in the story, it comes only to the lost sheep of Israel. And so what that means is these are the people of Israel who have strayed away from the true religion, right? So Jesus has come only for them. He didn't come for everybody else. In the story, he didn't come for everybody else. And that's important because I've always understood this as like kind of weird that I'm supposed to convert to your religion or I'm supposed to accept this figure Jesus Christ. Hold on a second. I'm supposed to accept this figure Jesus Christ even though I'm not Jewish, so why is he arguing with me? You see what I mean? Why is he arguing with me? I'm not Jewish. Why would I need to accept him if I'm not a Jewish person or a lost Israelite? I'm not an Israelite. And so I wasn't one of the lost sheep that he was looking for because I'm not an Israelite. This is a story directed at a specific race of people, specific group of people, specific ethnicity, which I would call them the Aramaic people. They were Aramaic people that lived in that territory of Canaan. And they were the ones who came up with this religion. It was their language, and it was their culture, and it was their religion, which is all this revolves around. And so what I'm saying is, when you say, as he does here, that his idea is that every race of people is expected to accept Jesus Christ, I would say that's not what the Bible says originally. I mean, yeah, the later writers of the Bible started going along on this idea that everyone has to become Christian. Well, this is really the Roman idea. But that wasn't originally the Roman idea, though, was it? Because in my opinion, the gospel story looks to me, minus the philosophy. There's some philosophy which I would say the philosophy. If you want to know who came up with the philosophy of the Gospels, you'd look into the Greco-Judaic philosophers. So these are philosophers who are very close to the Greek line of thinking and philosophy of ancient Greece, and that they were adapting this to their own religion. Philo, Judaeus, is a primary figure in that. And I would not be at all surprised if he was one of the authors of the Bible, even though his name isn't mentioned, but because his family ran the tax business out of Alexandria, Egypt, on behalf of the Romans. So one of the things that I have a book on mysticism, and there's a quote in there from Philo that says, almost word for word, I don't have it in front of me, I'm not going to go grab it while we're talking here, but it says almost word for word, Luke 17:21, that the kingdom of God is within you. And Philo wrote pages and pages and pages of explanations of the Bible and trying to make it harmonize with the Greek philosophy. And that was really what he was trying to do. And a lot of people have tried to do this. And I remember as a younger man, I thought that this was a possibility. But, what you have to do really is you just have to let things be what they are and not try to turn them into something they're not. Just let it be what it is. So later when I tried to really understand what this religion was, I just decided I'm just going to look at it for what it is. Like, what is it exactly? Exactly what are what is it trying to say? And that's what it is. It's not perfect. It'll never be necessarily what you want it to be if you don't think it's perfect. And if you do think it's perfect, you're probably insane, and that you can't see that there are mistakes in there because it was written by men. So anyway, but let's not get too far off into that. Philo-Judaeus tried to harmonize Greek philosophy with the Bible. His family ran the tax collecting business in Alexandria, Egypt, known as the Alexander family. They were not descendants of Alexander the Great, but because they were from Alexandria, Egypt, they took the name Alexander. They're a Jewish family, the Alexander family, and they ran the tax collecting business for the Romans. And now, what do you find in the story of the Gospels? You find a lot of passages about being, Jesus being nice to the Roman tax collectors. Those, hey, it's just a tax collector. He's not such a bad guy, right? Sit down, have a drink. Have some food, we'll eat with the tax collector. So this is obviously some Roman propaganda mixed in there. To me, it's obvious to me. Now, the other one is, now this is the one that people that don't like bankers and so forth, they'll go on about how the money changers, they'll call the bankers like the money changers, and Jesus whipped those money changers, and he whipped them in the temple, and this shows that Jesus hates, the bankers. Well, that's not a very good analogy if you don't like bankers, particularly like international bankers at the Federal Reserve or something. Because the fact of the matter is that the money changers at the temple were changing Roman coins into Judean coins to use at the temple because they rejected the Roman coins. And this would be like if you decided that you're going to have your own little cult or your own little country, and people walk in there with dollars, and you can't buy anything with the dollars, so you make them take your coins, which have a picture of your face. No, well, the Jews, they didn't have a picture of the face, so you make them take your coin, which is says rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God, and you put that on your coin, and you can't buy anything in your town without this coin on it that says rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God, Benjamin Franklin. And so this was much closer to a hatred of an empire than it was anything else. And so a lot of people that hate bankers will point to this passages of Jesus Christ attacking the money changers as if he's attacking, as if he would go after these bankers over there in New York and D.C. This is not the case. Oh, in San Francisco, they're also there. So now this gets us to the Romans, the passages in Romans. So here's another example. I'm talking to this guy. There's another guy on Twitter. I'm allowed on Twitter again, and there's a guy on Twitter who's Catholic, and he was happy that the Catholic Church was getting something good happened for the Catholic Church. Let's just put it that way. And it was fine. It was like a nice thing. But so one of his followers suggested that well, Romans 13 says the government is established by God, and therefore we should not try to get out of any mandates that the government comes up with, right? So that just set me off, man. So I just was like, that's one of the things I really don't like about Christianity is this. It's just there's so much Roman propaganda. There's a lot about it I like. I like some of the philosophy. Like I said, I've learned things in Christianity that I use in life, like knowing a tree by its fruits. That's very important. Matthew 23 is really good. The first time I read the Gospels, it hit me like a ton of bricks when I actually sat down and read it. And Jesus was saying that I am, what was it? There's a lot of passages in there when he's arguing about how well, I'm not going to go into that right now. There's just stuff in there that hit me really. If I don't have the passage and I can't remember exactly what it was, then it's no point in going over. There's just certain things in there which were very true to me. Because a lot of the here, let me explain it this way. A lot of the arguments that he had with the Pharisees in the story were arguments that I was having with people about my own spiritual nature. And I would argue with Christians about this, and because they were so materialistic, they didn't understand how I could be a part of me, not my physical body, but a part of me would be eternal, right? And so anyway, when I'm reading Jesus and he's arguing with some of the Pharisees, he's saying like I used to mess with people and say word for word. I used to do this to Christians. I would say word for word the things that Jesus said to the Pharisees, and I would get the same responses from them. Not saying I'm Jesus. I'm saying he was saying that he was eternal life, and then I would say the same thing, and I would get the same responses that the Pharisees gave to Jesus to me. And so I used to just have a lot of fun with that. I used to do that a lot. But we're not talking about that right now. We're talking about Roman propaganda, which is something I don't like about the Gospels. So we go over this story called Romans, and I responded. This guy's going off about how in Romans it says, the Romans government is established by God. Well, of course, that's why they wrote. That's what it looks like to me with the four Gospels is there was some existing philosophy about life that was Greco-Judean. It was both. In other words, it was Greek Jews, Greek Jewish philosophers had come up with a particular philosophy rooted in Judaism, or not Judaism meaning the religion of the Jews. So that's what Judaism means, not the Talmud. They didn't have the Talmud yet. They just had their religion, which when Philo is talking about their religion, he doesn't talk about any of the things that from the Talmud or any of the stuff that or the Pharisees. He keeps going back to the Old Testament. Okay, this is different than what we have now with Judaism, because they're always using the Talmud as like the basis of their religion. This wasn't the case in the early period. They would use the Old Testament. That was the thing. The Torah was the Torah. The law was the law of Moses. The Torah wasn't the Talmud back then. Anyway, what am I talking about? But there were Jews who were Greek Jews, and they were very much like the Greeks, and they were very much into, aside from their own religion and their own philosophy out of the Bible, they also were deeply steeped, absorbing, the Greek philosophy. And so there was that existed. The Romans seem to have not had any problems with the people in the north, the Samaritans, because the passages that say, don't go to the Samaritans, don't go to the Gentiles. This is what it says. It says this in the New Testament. You can read it. You could just get the keyword phrase and read it. I don't know the passages. It says, don't go to the Gentiles, don't go to the Samaritans, but go only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel, down there in Jerusalem. The area where the Jews are. Why? Because the Romans were having trouble with the Jews attacking them. They weren't having trouble with the Samaritans or these other people resisting them. It was only the Jews of the lost sheep is what they're being called now in the Bible. that were resisting the Romans with violence. With violence. Anyone collaborating with the Romans was being attacked, being stabbed. It was a violent insurrection against the Romans. Now, this is actually what the Bible originally says to do. So that's why I have an issue with these two books, because they're not really the same religion. They come out of the same traditions, but they're not really the same religion. Like, I just, and it's irritating. I just heard on the radio, because I scan through I'll scan through my talk radio, and I'll hit the Christian station once in a while, and it's about, Christianity. God has an unconditional love and affection, an unconditional loving affection for everyone. That's not what the Old Testament was about. This is just an entirely new religion, and it keeps becoming. That's a sales pitch. That's a sales pitch by people that want to get you on board with their ideology. In America, it's oftentimes for political purposes. Some are good, and I'm actually here. I'll be honest with you. Christians, in my opinion, are leading the way in the good things that are happening politically on a social level. Okay, that's where I stand. And so I don't really see a lot of it. I see Christians leading the charge against a lot of the destructive forces in the culture. And I wish they were doing it more, because there's not enough of them doing it. There needs to be more of that. So that's where I'm coming from. But when you say that there's an unconditional affection for everyone, I'm sorry, this is not true. And so this is where I'm going with this. It's unconditional love, and God is love, and God loves everyone. And the Roman government was given to you by God. So everyone needs to just be obedient to the Roman government because it came from God. That's a false God. Saying that the Roman government was established by God is a false God. Whatever God they're saying established with that's not real. That's not the real God is. That's not what it is. The real God can be found in your conscience. That's the gateway to God. Talk about Babel, the Babylonians, where they had this big tower of Babel, and that was the gateway to God, because the God then was the stars, and that was astrotheology. So you'd go up to this temple that reached way up into the sky, and you would be at the gateway to God, because you're way up there, and you're surrounded by all these stars. It's the gateway to God. But it wasn't the gateway to God, because that's not the true God. I mean, those are the old gods, the stars and all that stuff. So that was nice. I like that. I like astrotheology. But it's not the gateway to the true God. The gateway to the true God is your conscience to know with. That's the gateway to the true God. That's the God spoken of also in the Bible. The reason I know that is because you read the book of Jasher and you just look up what does the word Yasher mean. It means to be righteous. That was the whole idea of the Abrahamic religion, was righteousness. That's what it evolved into. It didn't start out that way. It evolved into that. From that, there's passages in Isaiah and so forth, which were redefined and rehashed in the Christian books. So it comes from this old tradition. I don't want to get off too far, but here's what I'm going to say. So this guy's going, the Romans this and the Romans that, and the Romans set up our government, in Romans 13, God set up the government. Well, that's not the Old Testament, dude. You got to read Exodus 15. Okay? The Lord is a man of war. The Lord is a warrior, right? Who kills the enemy who's trying to attack his tribe, who destroys the chariots of the Egyptians. He's a warlord God. He's a God of war. And so you have to look at the God of the Israelites started really as a war God. It did not start any other way. I mean, if you look at where it started, now they'll say, I think incorrectly, you read the book and you say, well, it started with Noah, and then you have Noah and his sons and Abraham and Jacob and Isaac and Joseph and then it led into Egypt. And they were all followers of this ancient God. No, That's not what happened. That was written after the fact. After the fact. I believe that was written after the fact. It's hard to say, but it seems like that was written after the fact. Because the God of the Israelites really starts, I believe, with Moses, who we're told, this Moses figure, whoever Moses was, wrote these 5 books, and he wrote that into the 5 books. He wrote that there's always been a God of virtue, and it was passed along through this race that came into Egypt, which he's descended from. Well, it makes sense that he would write it that way, whoever wrote it. But it looks like it started as a war god. And because you can't, it's the war god is the tribal war god. Okay, and if you read Exodus, it really is clearly a god of war. And that was the idea, from a god of war from Exodus and through the establishment of the kingdom of Israel until its destruction. The reason why it was destroyed, according to the books, is because they failed to continue to make war on the other people who were worshiping the other gods and instead were tolerant of them. Now, I'm not advocating intolerance of other people, because I don't think that I don't think that it's good for people to think that they have the absolute truth and to force other people into that through violence, because in my experience, these people don't have it. So it's just, you're dealing with something, in my opinion, which has to do with one's conscience. So how do you violently force someone to follow their conscience? You can't. They have to decide to do it. You can exclude people who don't, because they're not. You don't want to be around them because they're evil, they're criminal, they're perverts, they're degenerates, they do a lot of things to cause problems for other human beings, and so you can exclude them, but you can't use violence to force them to believe something that they're not capable of believing, is what I'm trying to say. So, long story short, these are not the same gods. Let's just take a look at it. Let's assume that the God of the Israelites, let's assume I'm correct, and that the God of Israelites started as a war god who the Israelites described as the creator god, which would have been the equivalent of a Zeus or an Ammon or a Baal, but better, because he's their god. It's not some other god. And he's the true God that created the world. And those gods, the other gods of these other people, are made into statues. And that's the big difference. That they're saying that theirs is the truest one. Okay. And the purpose of this God is to wage war on behalf of the Israelites. That's what they're doing with it. So it was a war god. But then it was also... Now, how did it become a god of virtue? Because in order to appease a war god, or any god, you have to follow the commandments of this god, and so that it will be on your side, right? And so there becomes this idea of how to behave in order to get the gods to favor you. And so this developed into an entire philosophy of virtuous living. And so this is kind of how it came about, I would say. It's kind of how it came about. In what exact order, I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell, but that's kind of how it came about. And then it continued on in that way. But to say we don't resist evil, and to say that the Roman government was granted by God, these are all, that particularly one is a lie. That you're supposed to submit to a government which is despotic or tyrannical or involved in evil. You don't submit to it. If you can overturn it militarily or by force, you should. If you can't overturn it militarily or by force, then you should not participate in it, and you should withdraw from it so that you're not involved in what it's doing. Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and receiveth not of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquity. In reference to Babylon, right? In Revelation. So you should not participate in it. If you can't overthrow it through force, then you should just back away from it and not, you don't give it any of your power, you don't give it any of your support, you're just, nope. You can go, it can just go on without you. right? Because you're not going to be part of it. And if enough people just did that without using any force, it would lose its influence. It would fall apart. So, but the point here is that the Old Testament God was really a tribal war god that kind of evolved into a virtuous God because every God has. Now, I would say that that the God of the Israelites was put together quite uniquely in that this God had a certain design for the universe, and so the laws were supposed to, you look at the Ten Commandments. Those are good. Those are good. The Ten Commandments: don't murder. Honor your mother and father. Do not bear false witness. That's really important. So you can kind of see where the religion ended up going. It was a war god, but it was also a god that wanted pure souls, wanted virtuous souls, and that's what made the God favor you, was to have a virtuous lifestyle, a righteous lifestyle. So it evolved into that. How long did that take? I don't know. Maybe it didn't take long at all. Maybe it happened over a long period of time, or maybe it happened at the same time. But then when you look at the passage, so there are actually quite a lot of contradictory passages saying, we're going to exterminate these people and those people and bash babies' heads in, and yet you want to be a righteous, loving, well, it never says loving. That's one of the key points. The Old Testament never says to be loving and be affectionate and that God loves everybody, and it doesn't say that. It says quite the contrary. It says God loves certain people based on their behavior. That's what it says. And it's not a universal God, although any God could worship the Creator in their own tradition, which is what I actually recommend. Worship the Creator in your own tradition. That's another argument that I had with somebody. It was on the same social media that I'm able to communicate on, because it's run by a Christian who believes in free speech, which is pretty cool. So this other guy I'm talking to is going on about how the Jews were really the German, like the Germans were actually the Jews, and that then there's these fake Jews that aren't, the Germans were like the real Jews, and it's just like that's what he believed. He thought that the German race from Germany, that those were actually the Jews, and that these other Jews, those are the fake Jews. It's just ridiculous, okay? And you're taking someone else's culture because you like their religious ideas or something, because you read the Bible and you thought it was good, but then you're upset that you're not the race that's being described in there. So then you claim that the Germans are the real Israelites. The Germans weren't the Israelites. No. The Israelites were an Aramaic people. Okay? They're Caucasian, but they're not the Germans. They weren't the Germans, dude. That's so dumb. Anyway, we had a big argument about that. And anyway, we're not going to go into that one, though. Okay, I think I've said what I wanted to say here. You have it's really two different philosophies between the Old Testament and the New Testament. The Old Testament is about fighting. It's not, that was the idea, loving everyone. Loving everyone. It was never a religion about loving everyone. It was a religion that the Creator God only liked you and only favored you if you were a virtuous being, if you were a righteous being. So if you were crooked, if you're a deviant, if you're a criminal, then this God would not like you. And then as the nation, because this religion was really built around nationhood, since the time of the Exodus, it was built around nationhood. I guess you could say if there was an earlier religion with Noah, and then it was just like, it was like an individual religion, right? There was no organized state. But once there was an organized state, it was about the state or the nation, the ethnic nation, gaining God's favor by being true and righteous and good. This is where it gets into the conscience, because all that stuff that you read and you think, the God of the Bible, it's actually the God of the conscience. It's not a God in space. It's a God of the conscience. And so it's not a person, it's not a guy with like an army that comes floating down from space. It's not any of those things. Although it's portrayed that way, both in the Old Testament and in the New Testament and in the later writings of Revelations and all these other books, because people had a misleading idea about what it is. So they would continue that misunderstanding throughout history. So maybe that'll end now. Anyway, what I was going to suggest was that if you like the story, because you like the idea of the creator and the God of the human soul, then you just have that God in your own tradition. So if you're German or French or Italian or Greek or English or American or Canadian, you worship the creator in your own tradition. It doesn't have to be the Jewish tradition. It doesn't, you shouldn't be trying to like, oh, we got to learn Hebrew and we have to grow our locks, our side locks, and we got to do this. Then no, there are some things that you can't do if you're truly a follower of the religion, and you'll know what those things are based on your conscience and based on natural law and based on the physical, the human anatomy. But we can't talk about that because this is Facebook, and they're not part of that religion on Facebook, and they reject it. And so we don't want to offend them because that would be bad. But as far as like cultural, like, oh, we have to have the same holidays that the ancient Israelites have. Well, you don't. You're not this. You're not them. You're a different race. You're not. You shouldn't be trying to be the ancient Israelites. Just be your own culture. You're the Germans, or you're the Russians, or you're the Ukrainians, or you're the Latvians, or the Lithuanians, or whoever you are. You're the Filipinos. That's why trying to make it all this universal Catholic thing, in my opinion, is a bad idea. Because it's like it all goes back to the Jerusalem, and that's like we all have to be like the people. No, that that's not what we all have to be. We don't all have to be that. So no, that's why deism was an improvement, because it says worship the Creator without any kind of baggage. The baggage is interesting. It shows you how the religion came about. But the Creator is something within you. So you it's not that you should necessarily get rid of the books, but the book. You don't worship the book like an idol, or worship somebody else's culture like an idol, right? That's a good way to put it. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Hopefully you do. Maybe you don't. So anyway, but if you do, then great. If you don't, then I guess I'll have to explain it to you more. But not anymore on this video because we're wrapping it up. And thank you for listening.